Alright, what's going on everyone? In this video, we're going to be attempting a potential Vue interview challenge that you could see if you were applying for a junior or even a mid-level developer position. At some point during the interview process, you're either going to be given a test project or a test challenge to solve, so that way the employer can gauge your current skill level. Now, the idea behind this video is to get you in a mindset to be ready to answer a question like this if one was presented to you inside of an interview. Now, will you be prompted with a specific problem we're going to have here today? You may or you may not, but regardless of the fact, it's going to be a great way to practice your problem solving skills and also sharpen your Vue.js skills. And I'm going to be doing this live so that way you can get an insight into how I would solve something like this. Okay, so let's take a look at the problem we're going to be solving. So we'll begin with a blank Vue application here. And the idea is whenever we click on the application, or within the application, I should say, we want to plot a point at that specific click. Okay. And what we also want to do is add some functionality here for when we plot a point, we can undo that point. And if we undo it, we also want to have the ability to redo it and re-add that point back into our application. All right, so that's what we're going to be attempting here. So let's get started. Now, what I recommend you doing is pausing the video here and attempting to solve this problem on your own. And once you've done that, you can come back and watch my solution. Or if you just want to watch me code this out, that is fine as well. So the first thing that we'll want to do is listen for a click here within the application itself. All right. So inside of the template on our div here, we want to add a click handler, and the name of this function we're going to create when we click on this div, I'll call this, let's see, we'll do plot point like this, because essentially what this is going to be doing is plotting a point. And then inside of the script here, let's create this function. So say plot point, and let's set this equal to a new arrow function. And we'll also want to have this accept the events. So we'll pass E as a param there. And then what we can do is just log this out to the console here to kind of see what's happening. So we save that, head over to the application, and we inspect here. If we, let's see, go to console and we attempt to click here, as you can see, we're actually not seeing the event being fired here. So let's take a peek. And oh, all right, so yeah, that makes sense. Now, initially, by default, as you can see here, this div that is wrapping the app, and then we have this div right here, which is what we have our click handler on, has no height. So obviously, it won't be able to detect a click if it has no height. So what we can do is inside of our style tag, let's target, actually, we can't just target the div. We'll probably want to give it a class here, and then we'll call this point box. And then we can target point box here. And then we can just pass it a height and give it the value of 100 VH. Okay. And then that should work. So as you can see now, it's taking up the entire space. And probably what we can do to make this stand out a little bit better, give it a background color, and then we'll just do like a gray. Okay. So you can see it a little bit easier now. And hopefully now in our console, when we click here, we can see that we're logging out that event. All right, cool. So one other thing I want to do is just do a reset here. So we'll say the margin, set it to 0, the padding, set this to 0, and the box sizing set to border box like that. Okay, so that took away that initial margin and padding there. So now that we have the ability to detect the click, what we're going to want to do is grab that actual click's position, okay, because we're going to need that to plot a point inside of our div here. So we can actually get a reference to this, I believe, if we take a few clicks here and we open up the event. So what we're looking for is we have a couple different values here or properties. So we have something called the offset X and the offset Y, along with page X and page Y. And right now, these two pairs of properties are pretty much the same. As you can see, like there's a 1 pixel difference here. Now, The one that we want to use for this is actually going to be the offset X and the Y, because this is going to give you a relative position based on that actual div, while this is giving you a position based on the page itself. And we can kind of see this a little bit more clear if we add like an H1 and we just say point box like this. So now if I clear out my console, I believe those two should be a little different, because now it should be giving us a position relative to the div of point box, not the entire page. So as you can see, the offset Y and the page Y are a little bit different of a value. So we're going to want to use these two values right here to actually obtain a reference to the actual click itself. Okay, so what we want to do is when we click and run this function, we're going to want to generate a new object with the X and Y position. And then we'll want to store that inside of a new array. So we'll create this. So we'll say const, and we can just call this points. And we'll set this equal to a new ref because we want our data to be reactive. So I'll hit tab there to import that from Vue automatically. And then inside of here, we'll have our empty array. So inside of our function here, what we want to say is points dot value, because since it's a ref, we have to access the actual array value or the actual array itself using dot value here. And then we can use a method called push to push on a new object. And we're going to have a property called X, and then we'll set this to the param of E, and then we'll say offset and X. Okay, and then for the Y, we'll say offset Y, or sorry, E dot offset Y. All right, so there we go. And let's test this out. So what we can do is that we don't need to console.log this. We can actually use the Vue DevTools. Okay, so if we open up the Vue DevTools here, and we click on this. So now if we fire this off, let's do a refresh here. It's been acting up recently. I think there's a new update available. But now if we click here a few times, I think we just need to refresh it. As you can see, we have a couple new objects inside of our points array with the position that we just clicked in. Okay. So now that we're storing this, what we want to do is then plot a point inside of this div for each point that we have. Okay. So one easy way we can do this is using a v-for loop to iterate over this array of all the points and output a div for each point that we have, and then we can style that up, as a point. So what we want to do is create a div, and we can give it a class of, let's just do point, and that didn't work. There we go. And then what we can do is we'll say on here, we'll do a v-for loop. So we'll say v-for. And if you haven't used this before, this accepts a param. So we're going to call this param of point. Then we say in, and then we want to target the array, which is going to be points. Okay. And then what we can do, just to kind of show you what's going on here with that, and hopefully everything is working accordingly, we can just style up our point here. And let's just do a width of 100%. Give it a height of 100%. Oh wait, what am I doing? We need to give this a fixed height and width, so 20 pixels maybe, and 20 pixels. And then give it a background color. We'll do white, and that should be good. So if we now click inside of here, we should see a couple points being plotted. And if we go into our div, you can see that they're right here. Now, let's also make these round. So we'll say a border radius of 50%. Okay, so there we go. Now we want to position these based on the X and Y that we have inside of this array. So we can do this pretty easily just doing some style binding in Vue, which allows us to access the value of our param point, and then on that param point we have X and Y, which we can just set the top and left property to, and that should align it to the correct position of that point. So we can say colon style, because if we want to bind some data to these styles, we have to use a colon here. and then we'll say equal, and then we have our curly brackets here. So we'll say the top property, and then we need to pass it some backticks, because we're going to be doing some interpolation here. And the top will be determined based on the y value here, right? So we can say money sign curly brackets, and then do point dot y like this, and then we can do comma to add a couple, or we can do commas to add more than one property here. And then we'll say the left property, and then we'll do the same thing again, our money sign point dot x, and that should work here. So let's come back over here, do a refresh, and if we click right, and maybe like right here, we should see the point plotted there, but it isn't. So we obviously did something wrong. So first off, it's not looking to, it's not appearing that it's applying that style that we had, and it's also needs to be position absolute because we're setting the top and left. So let's do that. So we'll set the position absolute, and let's try it now, refresh it. Still not working here, so we obviously still did something wrong. We have the top, the left. Oh, we didn't add pixels here because it needs to have a value or some kind of unit. So if we save that now, there we go. Cool. So it looks like it's working sort of. Let's test it out. So if you click here, we have our point up there. If we have it up there, it's up there. So it seems to be something going wrong with that. So let's see here, top 190, left 240. Oh, I wonder if it's not I wonder if it's positioning to the top of here. Okay, so one other issue we might have is on the point box, we might need to set this to position relative. And let's try that. There we go. Okay, that seems to work correctly now. So as we click, it's pointing plotting the point in the correct spot here. Okay. So one issue I think we're going to have with doing pixels is if we downsize or resize here, you can see it's going to be running off the page. So one thing we could do instead, I believe, is use a percentage. So we would want to probably calculate the percentage based off the width of the screen at the current time. And then instead of plotting it in pixels, it's a percentage so that it becomes like responsive, which, may not be a requirement here, but that's something I definitely thought about when you're plotting in pixels. If you resize a screen, then obviously the ones that are like way over here, they're going to be off the screen. So to do this, what we could do is, I believe there's something we can, so if I console.log, I believe it's like the window property, and there's something called inner width. So let's just test this out. So if we say inner width like this, and we do a refresh and we click, so we get 1465. Okay, so yeah, that gives us the current width of the page, which is what we want. And then I believe you want to do the same thing for the height. So we'll say inner height like this, because we'll want to do it dynamically for the X and Y in case someone's like resizing this like this, or if, perhaps they're looking for something like that, because we always want to, adapt for responsive screen size, in modern web. So if we do this, we get 1129. Okay, so that's giving us the correct values. So to calculate the percentage here, we'd probably want to take this value, divide it by this, and then to get a percentage, we probably need to multiply it by, I believe 100 is, I think, what we need to do. So we'll say divide it by window.inner width, and then multiply this by 100, I think is what we'll need to do. So let's do that, and then let's do it for the Y here. Inner height, and then multiply this by 100. All right, so that should work. And then instead of setting this in pixels, we can set this in percentages, right? There we go. So now if we do this, it looks to be the same. It's still plotting it in the right spot, so that's good. And then if we resize it here, as you can see, the actual point box is going to, or what do we call this? Say the point box is going to shrink, and the points that we plot are going to be kind of responsive, which I don't necessarily know this is like something you'd want to do. You probably could set like a fixed width on here perhaps, and then maybe as you resize it just overflows and scrolls. But I kind of like the responsive feeling or aspect of this. It kind of, using percentages is always a good thing. So I kind of like that. So I think we're going to go with that. Definitely feel free to tweak around with that. But I think that looks good. All right. So now that we're plotting these correctly, let's also get rid of this here. Don't need that. We want to be able to kind of remove the points and then re-add them, like an undo and redo feature. So beneath our H1 here, let's add a div to add some buttons here. And then we're going to leave these as default. We're not going to get crazy with styling. So we're going to say undo point and then redo point like this. So let's think about this for a second. So if we want to undo a point, basically what it's saying, or what we're saying, is we want to take the last value that we added and we want to remove it. So it's actually not that complicated. So we can say @click, and we can say, we'll call this function undo point like this. And then we want to create a function called undo point. So this is equal to a new arrow function. And pretty much what we want to have this do is we want to say, so we're undoing a point, right? So basically all we want to do is say points.value, and then there's a method we can use on an array called pop, and that allows us to basically just take the last value of that array and just remove it. So this simple function should actually do that for us. So let's try this out. So let's just refresh here, and let's plot a couple points here. And if we click undo, you can see it's going to get rid of those points here. Okay, so that seems to be working. Now we also have a redo feature. So this right here isn't probably going to just work as it is, because if we want to re-add it, we no longer have a reference to the actual point that was being removed. So we'll need to store that somewhere inside of this app. So we'll want to create a new variable, and we'll just call this deleted points. I believe that should work. And again, this is going to be a ref. Set the initial value to a empty array. And then what we want to do simply is we'll want to actually have this value inside of a variable, right? Because we want to know what that is. So we'll say deleted point, and so this is equal to this value right here, which are pretty much just is going to return the object that's being removed. And then we want to take that value and push it to this new array. So we'll say deleted points dot value dot push, and then we'll push on this deleted point. Okay, and that should be working. So let's test this out now. So if we head to our Vue Dev Tools here and we do a refresh, I still don't know why these Vue Dev Tools are not working right, but so if we click a few times here, as you can see, we're having points added, which is good. And if we click undo, we don't see a point added. So I see a console error. Cannot read properties of undefined of push. So, oh, wait, deleted point. Oh, this should be deleted points. It's not. Okay, now let's try it. That should work now. So again, let's give this a try. Vue Dev Tools. I still don't know why this isn't working, but nonetheless, let's click a few times here. So our points are getting added. And then if we click undo, there we go. So this one is the X of 15.1 and 22.76, because remember, these are percentages now. So if we click here and we click undo again, it should remove that one, which it does. So this seems to be working as expected. Okay. So now that we have the stored point, we only really need to add the last feature or last part of this, which is redoing. So let's call this redo point, and then let's create our function here, const, and then redo point, and set this equal to an arrow function. And in here, we pretty much just want to do the opposite of what we're doing in here. So we essentially want to pop off the value of the last object inside of this new array. So what we'll do is say deleted points dot value and dot pop. And again, we also want to get this variable as a reference because we're going to then push this popped object into the points array here. So we'll just say maybe re-add it point. I guess that works. So we'll do that. And then what we want to do is just take this value right here that's being removed off this array and put it back into the points array here. So we'll say points dot value dot push, and then what we'll do is we'll just say re-add it point like that. Okay. And let's check this out inside of our application now. So if we refresh again and then we start to click some points here, let's add a few and then let's undo one. So that one should be removed, which it is. And if we click redo, it now appears and it gets removed from the deleted points array, and then it gets added back into this points array here. All right, so I think that about wraps it up for this Vue challenge. So hopefully you did enjoy the video. If you did, be sure to drop a like on it down below and consider subscribing if you are new here to the channel for more content. And I definitely had a lot of fun doing this type of video, and I'm going to be doing more of these in the future. So anyways, the code for this challenge will be up on GitHub. That link will be down below in the description. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.